what's up, everybody? Good morning. It is Saturday morning, and this is Multifamily Unplugged, and we are unplugged this morning, that's for sure. So buckle up. You're in for a ride today. A little twist, something different. So always trying to bring something different that's going to be educational, right? So I want you to think about what you're doing for yourself education-wise. You know, one question that somebody asked me years ago is, how much money do you spend every year on your personal education and your growth? What are you doing? What are you doing to learn more, to grow more, to be held accountable? You know, I got into coaching over 25 years ago and have always had a coach in my life. And I think the biggest trepidation I ever had was when I wrote that first check for $1,000 at an event I was at for 1 month's coaching. And back then, for $1,000 for a month, all you got was 4 30-minute phone calls, one call once a week, and not much more than that. So, when people look at coaching today, how is that affecting their life? How's it affecting their business? You guys know I always say that we don't grow professionally unless we're growing personally. So think about that as we go through this morning's episode. Hey, if you're new to the show, thanks for being here. I appreciate you being here. Thank the person who sent you or referred you to us, because this is where you get great content about multifamily, about real estate, about investing, about raising capital. We're always putting out relevant new content that's going to help you grow and become a better version of yourself. My guest this morning is a real estate broker coach from Northern California. His company is Flow Academy Coaching. He's Rick Warner. Let me bring Rick in here real quick. Rick, good morning.
Mike, thank you for so much for having me on. This is going to be exciting. I heard your intro, and I love talking about coaching and being coached.
Yeah, me too. I was coached for years, and then I coached for a couple of, pretty big real estate coaches out there. And I always love, helping people and giving people that extra edge or a little something. I had a coaching call with a client this morning, and I said, so what are your goals for the week? And you could just kind of physically see him sit back in his seat. Because usually we talk about, hey, here's an assignment, let's work on this. But I said, what are your goals? And I think when you start to look at things differently, that's, makes a difference. So,
yeah, if you have some goals, then you can start deconstructing and working backwards from there. Well, what is it going to take for me to achieve that goal? And then break it all the way down from, monthly, weekly to, sometimes daily activities. We were talking before we got on about running, and, I just hired a running coach, for example. Now, I've run 3 marathons. I know how to run, but what I don't know how to do is run a marathon in 3 hours and 35 minutes. And so I've hired somebody to get me to that next level of, being a runner. And so no matter where you're at in your career or in your personal life, I'm like you, I'm a big advocate on having a coach. And so, so I'm super excited to have our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that you're here. I think, it's kind of funny. I've been doing these podcasts for about 3 years, and, you can get on with some people and really just kind of feel a connection for people. And there's a real connection, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I have never met before this morning. And I just feel like there's that bond, that connection between us. And who knows, maybe it's real estate, maybe it's running, maybe it's, whatever, but I think we got a lot to cover. Hey, before we jump in, one question I always like to ask my guests, and I always threaten I'm going to write a book on this one of these days, but in one word, what best describes you personally and professionally?
I'm going to go with learner. I'm a learner. That's where I get my biggest source of all the things. And it goes back to what you're talking about with coaching. But for me, I have to come with that beginner's mind that they talk about. I do not want to be in a place where I think I already know everything. That's when I get myself in trouble. And it's definitely where I stopped growing. So if
Yeah.
I had to choose one word, I hope that I live in a state of being a learner.
Wow, that's awesome. 300 episodes, right? I don't know that anybody's ever said learner. So
Mhm.
that's good. That's good news for this morning. So, hey, how about a little bit about your background? Talk about how, where you were and how you wound up in real estate and how you're at where you're at today.
It's funny you say wound up in real estate, which I think is about 95% of the people that are in real estate is you wind up there, right? You try other things, you do all the things, and then you kind of wind up in real estate. And that was definitely my case. I was a financial advisor before that. I had some moderate success there, essentially very similar business in that you have to do lead generation and create, relationships and so forth. But real estate it just worked well for me right out of the gate. 2004 is when I got licensed, and it's funny because I actually had some pretty good success. I don't know if you remember the market back then. I'm sure you do, Mike. It was hot. It was smoking hot, and so kind of everybody who got in, you had some pretty good success, and more based on the market rather than me. And I thought, yeah, I've really got it. I found my place, and this is great. And I bought $1 million house, and we had 3 little kids, and everything was amazing until September of 2008 when the whole world blew up. And so in September 2009, about a year later, I couldn't even pay my mortgage. It was my 40th birthday. And that was like, wow, I am in big trouble here. And so that's when my coaching started in terms of being a coach was I had nowhere to go. There was no other option. There was no other job. I couldn't borrow the amount of money I was needing to make. And I hired a coaching company, and that was the difference for me to really start pushing that envelope, living outside of my comfort zone, doing things I didn't want to do, but knew I needed to do. And it just catapulted me into a whole different world. And so for me, that's been coaching. But so I don't know, I know you said background, but that just to kind of tie it into what we're talking about, that's been the thing for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, just the real short version of that, I was in the construction business and just burned out, right? As an entrepreneur, you do everything. And I was
Right.
still banging nails in the field. And I woke up one morning, I said, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. Sold the company and went into real estate, like a year later. And, success leaves clues, right, Rick?
Yeah, exactly.
Jim Rohn said that years ago, and I followed this real estate agent in my market that was super successful. Did everything he did to the T. He actually made me a cassette tape that I listened to over and over.
Cassette tape. So we know what year we're talking about now.
We know how old we are now, right, Rick?
Right.
So I followed his methods. I sold 78 houses my first 9 months in the business.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Now I only tell that story for this reason, because this is about you, but I want to talk about the commitment that it takes to do that type of business, to do the lead generation, to run, to stay committed to the business. Talk about commitment.
Yeah, it's funny because I have to say that I come from this place, and kind of going back to the learner idea, my natural state is not committed. My natural state is to be a quitter, to be honest. My natural state is to not be disciplined or be consistent. My natural state is to be kind of all over the place, and whatever I feel like doing, that's really at the core of what I came into real estate was that. And to some degree, maybe there's something good in there in terms of personality or charm or whatever, but it's horrible if you need to actually be consistent and purposeful in how you're going about it. And what I found is that I've actually become the kind of guy I used to hate. I say this all the time, but I really am all about what things am I doing on an everyday basis that are going to help me personally or professionally. And so, and being consistent, which I get, if you're like me at all, you're like, boring. I want flavor. I want something new. And I certainly find a way to do that as well. But having those core things that I do, like, for example, I meditate basically every day. I exercise almost every single day. I do affirmations every day. I talk to a certain amount of people every day. I meet with a certain amount of people every day. I write a certain amount of personal cards, blah, blah, blah. I could keep going on, but there's a regiment to what I do. And then it's like I'm planting seeds everywhere. And then as a result of that, I get to live this really amazing life. There's this phrase, it's easy to have a hard life and hard to have an easy life. Right.
Yeah.
And so the hard part is doing the consistency. But what that allows me is I get this really amazing life that I live now. I've lived the other way, which is not being disciplined and all that. And it was hard. It was way harder to do all the easy stuff and do whatever I felt like doing. And it would leave me with all these hard, tasks and hard, it was inconsistent and an income that rolled up and down and there was no consistency to it. And even in personal relationships, it was challenging, or whatever my mental state was challenging when I didn't have the consistency.
So before I ask a question, I have to make a comment. Gary Keller, you're familiar with?
Sure. Yeah. I was a Keller Williams person for a while. Gary's great.
Yeah, I love Gary, right? But Gary, in his book, Millionaire Real Estate Agent, talks about big habits, big models. And I always said about that, big results. So if you've got big models and you have big habits around those models, you're going to get big results.
100%. And actually, it's funny you say that, because the coaching program that I reached to that really was game changer was through Keller Williams, Gary's company, and it was called Bold, and it was a 8-week program, very intense, 8 hours a day for 8 weeks. And but yeah, it was a Gary Keller program.
Yeah. I love Gary. Even today, I think he's probably one of the smartest guys out there.
He's a great guy. Yeah, I've heard him speak many times.
Yeah. Hey, so you talked about this shift, right? From being to now all of a sudden you're committed and dedicated. And what caused that shift to happen? I mean, if somebody's listening right now and they're saying, man, I'm kind of just like Rick was, and I really would like to be like Rick is.
Yeah.
What caused that shift in your life?
Yeah. That's a great question, because that is exactly what I agonized over for years. It wasn't like one day I woke up and went, I'm going to be consistent now. It was more like, man, I'm inconsistent. Man, over and over and over again. But because I was in these coaching programs, and first it was Bold, and then it was Tom Ferry, and then it was, whatever was next. And then somewhere in there, I started going to the Core out of North Carolina, and they're super intense. And so I was I go to a great seminar and I get all these great ideas. And so first it was, what are the things that I do want to do on a daily basis, or that if I did on a regular basis would really dramatically change my life? But the real difference came when I connected that with some accountability. See, I'm not very good at being accountable to myself. I'm just not. I'll go with the whim of my feelings, or things with, oh man, something great would happen. Now I don't have to do that thing, or this is terrible. I don't feel like doing that thing, or even maybe just forgetting. And so I started this practice called the Daily Navigator, where I have a bullet point of, daily things that I want to do, the kind of list that I went through earlier. And every morning I decide, am I going to do that task or not? Am I going to meditate today? Am I going to do affirmations? Am I going to do exercise? Am I going to listen to a podcast like this? Am I going to read a book? I'm going to talk to people, whatever it is. And I check those boxes and decide that day, I'm going to do this today. And then I sign it like a contract. I take a picture of it, and then I send it out to my accountability group. So now I've not just told myself I'm going to do this. I've told this whole group of people, hey, you guys, I'm doing this, and I'm going to do it like it's a must-do list, not a to-do list, not I hope I get to it list. Like, I'm doing this today no matter what. And I did that. I started doing that 4 years ago. It was actually the anniversary for that was just a couple of days ago of my 4-year anniversary of doing it. And now I've got a bunch of people doing it. My students do it. We just did a seminar for people who aren't in real estate so that they could do it. And the accountability group is made up of 3 kinds of people: a mentor or coach or manager or somebody you look up to, a peer, somebody that you're on the same track with, and then a mentee as well, somebody that you're leading and taking them under your wing and that you're being an example for. And so out of that, what happens is as I go through the day and I start getting that like, oh man, I don't feel like doing this anymore. I think about my accountability group and then I've committed to doing that. And I go back to doing the things. I complete the list. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, a little mini journal, take a picture of it again, send it back out to the accountability group. And now I'm done. And so that is how I've gone from being inconsistent to absolutely consistent and getting things done every day.
So why do you think, and I kind of want to preface this, right? Because everybody gets up every day and brushes their teeth. And
Right.
it's just a habit that becomes your DNA. You're ingrained in it. And
Sure.
that's kind of how you start your day, right?
Yeah.
We'd hope. But why is building those habits that help you achieve what you really want to achieve so hard for most people?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and I think there's so many answers to it, but I think at the end of the day, it centers in our mind, right? Our mind has got so many convoluted and crazy things that it's coming up with why we should take whatever our next action is, that's where we get ourselves in trouble. And so the idea of this daily navigator thing is to override that entirely, to take the process of making a decision off the table, because I think that's where we get in trouble. It's when we're like, do I feel like doing that next? No, I don't actually. I don't want to do that now. And so we take that out of the equation and we go, no, I said to everybody I was going to do this thing. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. And what ends up happening is you do the things that are important. But the other great thing is you stop doing the things that aren't important because you only have so much time to get things done, right? All of a sudden, cleaning your desk or, going through emails or, this is what I love about people that are in business at all. How you doing? Oh, I'm really busy. Well, what does that mean? I'm really busy. Are you being busy doing something that's effective, or are you just poor time management? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I do all this stuff, and I'm sure that there's some people listening going, that's a lot of stuff. That's ridiculous. I don't even want to do that much stuff. I totally get it. I actually work less hours than I did in 2014, and I make more money, right? Because I'm super honed in on the things that are important, and I don't waste time doing the things that aren't important.
Yeah, and I want people to really get that. You work less hours and make more money.
That's right.
A lot of times I think people get this conceptual thought that, hey, if I work more, I'm going to make more or earn more. I'm going to get further along. It becomes, and Rick, I think you and I grew up in a time. We came up in business and entrepreneurial world in a time when there were less distractions, right?
Yeah, right.
Maybe we had email at the time, but now we have email and Instagram and Facebook and dating
notifications.
apps.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's constant.
And so there's a ding or a bell or something that rings, and it's that shiny object or squirrel syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the idea of checking off the list on the navigator, but how do you do that and not get sidetracked, right? Because I think the average person, it just, and I do it, right? And I'm a high achiever, and so are you. But how do you do it and not get sidetracked?
Well, it becomes its own habit, but the key really is the accountability group. At least for me, and maybe I think to some degree, I'm using my own ego to work for me. Our egos generally are mostly causing problems, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many problems I have in my life because I have this ego that is really driving a lot of what's going on. But I'm trying to take that same ego and use it for me, which is I don't want to look bad in front of my accountability group by not doing the things I'm saying I'm going to do. So it's not that I don't get distracted. It's that I get distracted less. But even more than that, I'm really focused on just making sure that list gets done. Then whatever else happens, it happens. But I know that by the time I'm checking off that last box and sending it out to my group, and hopefully that's around 5:00, maybe 5:30, that now I can be distracted for the rest of the day. Or even if I'm getting distracted during the day, as long as I'm still doing that list, it kind of doesn't matter. The bigger problem is when you get distracted so much that you don't actually do the things that are what are necessary for you to have that great peace of mind and to have that business that you're trying to create.
So let's just talk about the real estate business for a minute.
Sure.
Being a real estate agent, broker, whatever it's called in your area. I know, here in Illinois now, we're brokers and then managing brokers. We used to be agents and brokers, right?
Yeah.
But how do and I want to go back to that lead generation piece.
Sure. Yeah.
What is important in that, and how do you go out and do lead generation? How do you coach your people to do that?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and I think we can take apart the part about me being a real estate agent, because I'm going to assume that most of the people listening are not real estate agents. So let's just talk to the normal entrepreneur, whatever they're doing, or maybe it's somebody who. Yeah.
Let me just say this really quick though. The disciplines that you're going to talk about, and I'm assuming you're going to talk about right now, are the same disciplines a real estate investor needs to have in talking to sellers about buying a property, or a wholesale person who's talking to sellers about buying their property, or a capital raiser who's raising private equity for a real estate syndication. What you're going to talk about right now, I believe, falls into any of those categories.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So
are you ready to skyrocket your investment portfolio and leave a legacy? Are you tired of inconsistent returns received in the stock market? Do you think it may be time to take a look at alternative investment options for your portfolio? Passive investing in multifamily real estate could be that option. With no tenants, trash, or toilets, providing a solid return on an annual basis that outperforms traditional investing, also receiving a monthly or quarterly return along the way. These lower risk and secure assets are a great hedge against inflation. If you want to learn more about these types of opportunities, you can email me directly to schedule a 15-minute consultation to see if you qualify. Just email me at mike@mikemorawski.com.
So to me, I'm in the business of relationship creation and cultivation. So what does that mean? That means that I'm an accumulator of great relationships, and I'm always on the lookout for people who I can connect with that are going to ultimately be somebody that I can help and that can help me. And so that's what my criteria is. Now, that means that I need to be in front of a lot of people, most of which are not going to be the people that I necessarily want to stay in front of. But as I talk to more and more people, I connect with somebody maybe like you, Mike, and I go, you know what, that guy, Mike, we really connected on something. I'm going to really be purposeful about staying in front of him. So maybe, the next time I give you a call and I say, hey, Mike, that was awesome to be on your podcast. Let's grab coffee one of these days and I want to hear about what's going on in your life, what's going on in your business. And I start an actual relationship that is relationship first and business second. Right. And then on top of that, I really want to focus in on that conversation. I want to be talking about you. I want to know more about you. And I want to be curious about you. And I really want to understand what's making you tick. And somewhere in there, what happens is, as you're talking to somebody about them, they kind of go, I kind of like this guy, Rick, even though you don't know anything about me, right? That's just, there's a great book called Endless Referrals, Bob Berg. And then he wrote have you read that one, Mike?
Yeah.
It's such a great book. And so one of the things he talks about, and there's the 10 great open-ended questions. And then the big kahuna question, he calls it at the end, is, hey, Mike, after we've, met each other, maybe at a networking event or maybe at a coffee or whatever, I go, hey, Mike, how would I know if I'm sitting in front of a great prospect for you? Right. And it's like, wow, who would ask that question? And how is that person going to be, how are they going to feel when they get that kind of question? So we take them through a whole process of really being focused on them for two reasons. One is you really want to know about them and it needs to be authentic. But also you're also trying to find out, am I really creating something here? Is this person worth my effort? Because from that point, I'm going to make sure that they're getting regular touches from me, regular invitations to, client events that I do. They're going to get thank you cards from me. They're going to get a personal newsletter. I send out a newsletter every month. Actually, let me tell you about this great newsletter. This is a great idea for people, I think. I send out a newsletter every month, but it's not a newsletter. It's called Below the Waterline, and it's got nothing to do with real estate. It's got nothing to do with business at all. Usually it has to do with some story I had in my past where I learned something it's a below the waterline. Usually I'm pretty vulnerable in there. I'll talk about some of my real struggles of, maybe because, like, for example, one point I was living in a tool shed, homeless as a drug addict. Like, that's part of my history. My clients all know that about me, right? Or maybe it's a story about when I had foster kids when I was younger. But it's a real heartfelt story. But these people get this letter from me every month, and it really helps them connect to me as a real person, not just some real estate agent. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's those kind of practices that we make sure that we create. And what happens is, by the time people are connecting with you, because what we're really shooting for and what the goal and the listener should be shooting for is know, like, and trust, right? That's who they want to do business with, people who they know, like, and trust. And so we're creating that through these best practices by focusing in on them, being vulnerable with ourselves, sharing our pain, and staying in front of them in a non necessarily business way.
Yeah, and let me put some context to what you're saying, because it took me 3 years in the real estate business to understand exactly what you're talking, because I was in such a churn and burn business. So here's what I knew. I knew that I could make 20,000 dials a year. Every time I picked up the phone, I made $20 for dialing the telephone. I knew from 20,000 dials that I would sell 125 listings a year. It was, I knew my numbers. I knew 3 years in the business was churn and burn, right? I didn't care about people. I didn't care about relationships. And as soon as I started to really care about you and your situation, more so than thinking about dollars or the value, the monetary value that came with that conversation, my world shifted and changed, right?
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand that it, the relationship thing. And I love what you're talking about, this below the waterline newsletter, because you're letting people know who you are at the core. And, I think people appreciate that, especially when they're going to do business with somebody who's vulnerable and real.
Yeah. And it's so counterintuitive, right? Because usually in business, we're all about, and maybe what we've been taught, like, hey, put your best self forward, which is also true, but that doesn't mean that you can't be vulnerable. But I do remember the time of, I think probably it was your Mike Ferry days. If it's okay that it was churn and burn. It's like, smile and dial and all that. And to be honest, I just didn't even have that in me. I don't have that skill to just dial a bunch of people I don't know. And so I out of force have to be the relationship guy. Like, that's how it works. But the cool thing is, when you're creating relationships, all of a sudden, as long as you're doing that stuff, the phone's ringing my way. Right? People are calling me, hey, you got to talk to my guy, Rick. He's amazing. He's going to take care of you. Right? People I've never even heard of are calling me because I take the time to really create the relationship. To your point, it's not as fast, right? Because I'm not selling people anything. I would say, that's not really my role. I'm not a closer. People close themselves. But if Mike Ferry were here, he'd be like, it's terrible. You got to be a closer, right? And I'm more of the Tom Ferry, right? The Tom Ferry guy is more relationship guy.
Yeah. And that's why they could never get on the same page, for that reason right there.
Yeah.
So we used to laugh about that. But yeah, I was totally one of those guys. I mean, I wore 2 headsets. I had 2 telephones in front of me.
Wow.
I dialed 2 numbers at the same time. Whoever picked up first, I'd hang up on the other one and keep dialing the phone, waiting for the next.
That's a skill, man. And you got paid handsomely for it, I'm sure. And that's great. I do that, to this point in my life, I do not have that skill.
Yeah. When I think back to those days, I think back, with a lot of humor around it, that, but it gets you to where you are today, that whole process. Right?
Sure. Right.
Whether you fought yourself to do it that way, or you did go and do it that way. Because I remember I grew up in that era with a bunch of guys and women that fought it, right? Didn't want to do it. And there's a handful of people I hung out with, and you may know some of them, but that we just kind of, we kept each other accountable, and we get on the phone and we role play and then start our prospecting and check in at the end of the day with numbers. And it's that accountability. I love your accountability groups,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
for me, that's key.
Yeah, and I want people to really understand. And if you are listening into this, and you're a capital raiser, or you're a wholesaler, or a single family investor, or a multifamily investor, thinking about what does this have effect on your business, it has got a big effect on your business. The relationship piece, the commitment piece, the big habits, big models. And build into that every day. And Rick, you're in the coaching business. I'm in the coaching business, and it sounds like we're teaching our people the same things.
Yeah, because that's what works, right? I mean, the only thing that's maybe on the unique side for me a little bit is the accountability piece. Which, by the way, anybody can just have. Like, it's done. I already gave you the whole format, so you can take everything I'm doing and you can recreate it. You don't need me for that. But everything else, like you said, this is just best practices, right? Yeah. These are just things that we've learned. I've not invented anything. I've done them, right? I would say that I've mastered them so that I do have the ability to then communicate that to somebody else. And I've also got the place where I know what it's like to not be that person. I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to not be disciplined. And I know what it's like to not be able to pay my mortgage and all that. So there's some relatability there, I think. But at the end of the day, I'm not coming up with anything really new here. These are all things that I've been taught, that I've been coached, right? Whether it was Tom Ferry or the Core or whatever it was. And then going from feeling kind of powerless over my own income and taking control of that, going, no, I can, like, you and I did this both. We lived through the worst real estate market ever and still are in the business, right? Well, the other, invest in real estate or whatever. And so I can hang my hat on that. And I did that by being the person that I didn't think I was even possible of being. And right. So, but I also know what it's like. I mean, I think there's some people going through that right now. It's like, it's starting to be really hard. And I want to be able to say to people, listen, I get it. It's hard. Maybe this hard is the best thing that'll happen to you, right? Because maybe this will take you to that place of learning and being disciplined and doing something different to the point where you're going to be in a whole new world after this, because that's what happened to me after that 2009 experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you meet new people today when you're out trying to build these relationships with a seller or an agent, or how are you out building these relationships today?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And I think, especially as a guy who doesn't want to do cold calls, right? I want to leverage the relationships that I already have. So here's a great trick that everybody can use. Anybody who's listening to this, doesn't matter what business you're in. If you want to meet new people, go to the people that already know, like, and trust you and say, hey, you know what I'm all about? You know what I'm up to? Who should I be in conversation with? I love this question because it's not who's going to buy or sell a house. It's who should I be in conversation with? You're talking directly to their brain beyond what they're thinking. Like, there's a subconscious level. When you ask them that question, their brain is going to automatically go there. What we're not saying is, do you know somebody I should talk to? Right? That's a yes, no question. We know that's not going to go anywhere. We want an open-ended question that goes right to a different part of their brain that's going to have them answer that question. Hey, you know what I'm all about. You know what kind of business I'm in. You know what I'm doing these days. Who should I be in conversation with? Then they say something like, oh, you know what? Actually, now that you mention it, because they weren't thinking about it, because people are generally thinking about themselves. Now that you mention it, you should talk to Joe. My friend Joe has been, talking about doing some investing. And I hadn't even thought about that until you just brought it up. So that's part number two. Then you say, oh, that sounds great. Hey, listen, so now I'm talking to you, Mike, because Mike, you're the guy I'm talking. I go, hey, Mike, since you mentioned Joe, what do you think about the three of us grabbing a cup of coffee or lunch one of these days? Would you mind setting that up? Right? And there's almost no reason they came up with the answer of who Joe is. And then they almost all the time, they go, yeah, that sounds, and then you just do what we call it's a triangle of trust, right? I like Rick, you like Mike likes Rick, they're the thing, blah, blah, blah. Here's Joe. And then you go to lunch and you have a similar conversation that I described earlier. The conversation is all about Joe. Tell me more about Joe. What are you up to, Joe? What are you into, Joe? What are your dreams? The Ford questions: family, occupation, recreation, dreams. And then coming from a place of listening and observing and really being present to that conversation so that you're there. Now there's a solid bond that's been made at that lunch. Now, it may be that you meet Joe and you go, Joe's kind of an asshole. I don't really like him. I don't want to spend time because you don't spend any time on Joe. But a lot of the time, Joe's worth the effort. And then you start creating and cultivating. So now they get into my whole world of being invited to client events, getting my letters, staying in front of them, blah, blah, blah. Right?
Yep. 100%. And I love what you just said, because when, and I want people to understand this, because here's a lesson I think you and I know subconsciously. If you meet somebody who falls into that category of someone you don't like, right, and don't want to do business with, if you have these big habits in place and you've mastered the repetitious boredom on a daily basis, you can choose who you want to and don't 100%. Want to work with.
That's right.
So the more of this you're doing, it opens the door for you to have more choices, because we're not going to mesh with everybody. But you want to also have the choice that if you don't mesh with somebody, to say, hey, you know what, I can't do business with you.
Exactly. It's a matter of scarcity versus abundance. This is another mindset that you can even have, even if your reality is scarcity. You can have an abundance mindset, even if you live in actual scarcity. I remember there was a few years ago, maybe 2019 or whatever. And for whatever reason, my business started to go a little sideways, and I enjoy a very consistent income. And all of a sudden I didn't sell a house for 2 or 3 months, which for a lot of agents is no big deal. But for me, it was like, I sell like 2 or 3 houses a month regularly. So I have all of this stuff based on me selling 2 or 3 houses a month. In California, that's plenty. That's more than most, right? Because our average price is a little bit higher than the rest of the country. And so all of a sudden I'm not. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can see my pipeline was slow and so forth. And I had to make a conscious decision to decide that I was not going to let my external circumstances dictate my internal happiness, right? That I could still live in a world of abundance, and that I was going to live with that state of mind. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that means if I do come across a guy or a gal who I go, man, I don't really connect with them, even in that moment, I was still not going to spend time with them. I wasn't going to go, well, things aren't good, so I got to create this relationship with this person I don't like, who's going to drive me crazy the whole time I'm working with them. No, I know that abundance is in my future. I know that abundance is in my present, right? Even if I'm struggling financially, there's other abundance. Maybe it's love in my family. Maybe it's my health. I always have abundance, and it's always there to be ready, or it's always ready. And I don't have to make decisions at all on scarcity.
Yeah. I love that. Man, you got me charged up this morning. Let's
do this. It's Saturday. Let's get going.
Hey, I told people buckle up, and definitely a lot of good information here this morning. And I would encourage people, go back and listen to this again. That's why I like podcasts or cassette tapes, right? Because you could always rewind or go back and pause it. But there's a lot of good stuff here. A lot of things that you said. I always like to kind of end on 3 questions. So let me just bonus questions, I call them. But what's the best book you've ever read?
Ali, that is a tough one. I really, really love books. So I'm going to say the one that was a game changer for me was actually The 4 Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a real easy read. I think it applies to everybody. It is not a business book. It's a personal development book. It will absolutely help you in business, but that set the course for me to really start reading a whole bunch of personal development books. So The 4 Agreements is probably my favorite. That if I had to choose one, that would be it.
Nice. And then best restaurant you've ever eaten at?
Best what?
Restaurant.
Oh, best restaurant. So the Oh shoot, it's called. Oh no, it's in Yountville. It's a big deal there. Now my brain isn't remembering, but it's in Yountville, California. It's a prefixed like super. You got to call 2 months in advance on the day to get in. Blah blah, and it 100% did not disappoint. And I'm really bummed that I cannot remember the name of it. But if you're listening, it's easy to find. If you just go Yountville Best Restaurant, I think it's been rated one of the best restaurants in the United States.
Interesting.
My 54-year-old brain won't give me access to it right now.
Where is Yountville?
The French Laundry. Sorry, it's the French Laundry. There it is.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds interesting.
It's really amazing. Yeah.
Where's Yountville?
Yountville is right by Napa, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I spent my 50th birthday in Napa.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
Bed and breakfast in just north of Napa, Marin Valley, county. At a little town that was kind of artsy, flashback to the
Fairfax.
Yeah, that was it.
I grew up. That's where I grew up. I lived in Fairfax and San Anselmo. I went to high school there.
Yeah, talk about a blast from the past.
Yeah, a bunch of hippies there. The Grateful Dead are from there. Yeah, it's a great town.
Yeah, and the best tourist attraction you've ever seen.
Oh my gosh. Tourist attraction. All right. How about this? The Colosseum in Rome. Does that count as a tourist attraction?
100%. Of course.
I went to Rome with my girlfriend last year and was blown away by the history there. Just blown away by, at some point, I didn't know this. At some point, for like 300 years, the Colosseum was essentially like a homeless shelter. For 300 years, longer than our country's been around.
Right.
That at some point, that's what the Colosseum was, among a bunch of other stuff. So just a crazy amount of history there.
It's crazy. Well, we have definitely gone a lot longer than we anticipated this morning, which is great though, because I love doing that because we then, you know that we are bringing great content. What do you want to leave people with this morning, Rick?
Well, first of all, Mike, I've really, really enjoyed this podcast. I'm fortunate I get to do a lot of these, and this has been, like you said at the beginning, we just kind of connect. And so that's awesome. I think the thing I want to leave people with is this, and this is kind of my big passion, is you are not stuck. If you are in a place where you're like, oh, I just can't, I don't know what or kind of even in that victim role, I promise you right now that there are opportunities for you to not be there anymore. And I'm saying this as a person who has multiple times been in my life thought I was stuck, and I wasn't. And not only was I not stuck, but catapulting myself out of not being stuck took me to a whole new world. Mm-hmm. And that exists for you. It is not unique to me. It is completely inclusive. So that's what I leave people with.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of these days we'll have a deeper conversation about that, you and I.
Sounds good.
Because I think a lot of people are stuck. They're stuck in their past.
Yeah, right.
And,
they're stuck in some old ideas. They're stuck in, their financial circumstances or
abuse or, there's a lot of things people are stuck in.
Yeah.
Hey, how do people get a hold of you, Rick?
So I think it's streaming on the bottom, but I'm going to do this too. And this might be re-recording, but you can just, if you're having a really hard time and you just need somebody to kind of connect with, I'm just going to give you my phone number, which is 415-302-6348. You can text me. I'm happy to connect with you and we can just chat, see how you're doing.
Love that. That's awesome. That's a great offer. I hope nobody listening in this morning is stuck or in a bad place, but if you are, there's a great offer for you to reach out and connect with somebody. Hey, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. This has been great. I want to say to my listeners, remember coming up October 19th and 20th is our 2-day multifamily summit. 15 speakers and panelists this year that will take you to a place in the business, in the space that you haven't been to, that maybe you're thinking about trying to get to, where you're going to learn and get some education, some knowledge, and I definitely know some inspiration. Rick, you'll appreciate this. I'm doing a working lunch on the first day with Matthew Ferry.
Oh,
Matthew, Mike's son, Tom's brother, mindset coach, just going to really talk about how do we get that drunk monkey off our shoulder to do what you and I have actually been talking about this morning? So,
Yeah. Matthew's great.
yeah. Love this every Saturday. We're here every Saturday morning, 10 o'clock Central Time.